You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. How are you? I've got a bit of a different kind of show for you today. My guest joining me is Dr. Alissa Silverman. Alissa is a mom of three, a therapist, and founder of Silver Linings Psych in Philadelphia. I originally asked Alissa to be a guest on the show simply from the point of view of being a therapist, and in turn she shared with me a personal story about her 12-year-old daughter. Alissa and her daughter are working on a project together that stem from her daughter's questions, interests, and concerns over some of the recent politics in the U.S., specifically around the overturning of Roe v. Wade. This project, which you of course hear all about on the show, so don't worry, it's coming, revealed some challenging moments in Alissa's motherhood journey, which include having to have really tough conversations before perhaps her daughter was developmentally ready, or perhaps before Alissa was ready, having to look at her own relationship with voting in the past and how she wants to do things differently for her kids. We talk about this and more, so here's Alissa, and as always, stay tuned after for my final thoughts. Hey, Alissa, so nice to see you. I'm so excited.
Hi, Christy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super grateful that you wanted me to speak a little bit about the topic of interest today. So thank you for having me here.
Of course. Just for the listeners, I approached Alissa to do an episode just from her point of view as a professional as a therapist. And Alissa has something going on kind of personally with her daughter that's really taken her household by storm. And we thought, why not talk about it? So, all right. So why don't you start by just sharing a little bit about your daughter and the project she says going on, her TikTok account. What's going on over there in your house?
Well, a lot. And I like to say a lot because my daughter, her name is Isabella, and we have nicknamed her since she came out of the womb Izzy Busy, because she's extremely busy, and that has only gotten more significant as she has aged in her almost 13 years. Her birthday's in October. And I think I've told you a little bit about her, so that nickname probably fits well.
Totally fits. I mean, we're here because of her. So yeah.
She's going into the 7th grade at a school in Philadelphia. And, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, there's been a lot of talk amongst her friends, amongst her teachers at school. It's, a lot of what people are talking about now. And she's learning about these things. And in learning about those things, comes a lot of mom questions, right? So sort of like the nitty gritty of what the overturning of Roe v. Wade means for her and our house. And as a mom and also as a psychologist, so many things run through my mind as that is going on. Because yes, at some point I definitely wanted to share with her about all the nitty gritty of all the adult things that us adults have to be thinking about all the time. But in terms of talking in detail with the 12-year-old about that, there was just a lot of mom feelings I was having. So anyway, in this, in sort of, I like to only answer the questions that she's asking.
Mm.
So that is a good way to communicate hard things, because you don't want to talk under their level, their developmental level, and over their developmental level. And their age doesn't really have, I mean, some 12, 13-year olds, are, not concerned with any of this stuff, not thinking of any of this stuff, and might not be able to handle sort of hearing some of this stuff. And then others, are sort of well beyond their years in that. So it's really about knowing your child and, talking to them with regards to the specific questions that you're asking them. Now, with the way our world is now, and especially after COVID, with, so much it's not, you don't have to really worry so much about the TV anymore. I don't think we've turned that on in years. I don't even know why we have them, actually. That's besides the point. But, TikTok and just their ability to access so much information, some of it true, some of it not true, some of it really exaggerated, some of it conspiracy theory. And, there's just so much out there. And as a, busy mom, working mom, it's really hard to sort of contain all that. So, we do the best we can. But one thing that I feel really strongly about in this house, and this isn't the first thing we've done, is that when we're sort of really trying to understand what hard things mean for us, I like to put that into action. Okay, so like, how can we do something to understand more about what's going on, to make a decision about how we feel about something, and then be an advocate for ourselves and then other people that don't have the voice to do that. So this is something that is just an important value that we have in our house. So with this, I think part of pursuing some advocacy in this area was also my effort to contain my feelings about what's going on. And so I knew that if we were sort of making it about a bigger thing versus just about myself or about her, that maybe we could make a difference. And, I always say to myself, say to my clients, say to my kids, say to anybody who'll listen to me, don't underestimate the power of one. Right. So, if we start thinking about the masses and changing the masses, we're going to be overwhelmed tomorrow. It was sort of like this podcast, right? It's, overwhelming to get on and, talk about some of these issues, but it's like, okay, Alissa, just question number one, just answer question number one. We can do question number one. And then, we'll start rolling. And so I really do try to live life in that way. And so I'm trying to encourage my kids to, and it also really helps us center ourselves. And, things are just bigger than us. But when you start to do that, you really dig into how deep the problem is and how long it's been going on for. And then the guilt and the shame starts to come in, it floods you, and then you have to go do your own work on that interpersonally.
The
And
whole thing. Yep.
the whole thing, and come back and sort of, keep yourself together and mom it. Just start with one. And so I'm not proficient in the TikToking world and video streaming and transitions and the sound. But, this is where everybody's at. So in talking with the busy, I said, what if you use your creative spirit? And if you are in the horoscope land, she's a Libra. Libras are very creative and energetic, and she was energetic about this. She's super creative. I am not in that land, but I'm an activator and I'm like a doer and a list maker. And so together I'm like, we will be unstoppable. And she decided to make a TikTok account. It is called Jen.Z.under 18. And since she is under 18 and she cannot vote, she wanted to talk to people under the age of 18 and get the energy out to people to encourage the adults in their life to vote. And all of her TikToks are in that spirit, because I think it was, and don't quote me, but because again, we're getting this from the interwebs, and I think it was a reliable site, but who knows? if you have any reliable sites, on this, please let me know. We'll take them. But I think it was 30 in Philadelphia. I think 38% of people came out to vote. And,
Wow.
this upcoming election, there's a reproductive rights question that's going to be on the ballot. There is a very extreme candidate that can really sort of change a lot of the ways that this election can go. And what I'm starting to realize is that, this problem has been going on for over 50 years now. And it's, my husband and I will have conversation. He's like, it's great you're getting on board now. And I'm like, I sort of, it's one of those things when you're just busy doing life, it's hard to do everything. And again, it's like, but I'm doing it now. And so instead of getting caught,
And just to clarify, is active participation in voting.
yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And not sort of dwelling in the fact that I didn't for all these years.
Mm.
So, and just a little bit about my history, if that is of interest, and, being sort of a little bit vulnerable and how I came to wanting to support this and dealing with my sort of shame around my political involvement,
Hmm.
or, almost a little bit of embarrassment, but it came about organically, and now here I am sort of showing up and wanting to do different. But if you think your listeners would be interested in that, I can share a little bit about my story.
Yeah, I do think they would, and I do want to get to it. I want to go back first, if that's okay with you.
Please,
Um,
let's go all the way back.
yeah, so just as far as where you started this conversation of basically saying that here's your 12-year-old coming on 13. And you said it a few times, like the nitty-gritty of what the overturning of Roe v. Wade is. Like that's the headline, right? But now she's coming home to you. She's hearing things, asking questions. And I just really want to give everyone listening like true perspective. We as adults, we don't have to explicitly say what the nitty-gritty of Roe v. Wade and the overturning is because we just know what it is. But think about having to talk to your kids, your 12-year-old, about abortion, about rape, about medical conditions that will end up with a woman dying because she can't get an abortion. Like
Yes.
these are so heavy, so nuanced, so like intense to be discussing with a child that we're not even sure. And this is no judgment on Izzy, this is just in general. It's like, can they even like fully process what that means? Like they don't even have the experience of potentially even having a sexual partner. So it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, like this is a
I have the
lot of
chill.
layers
I have
of,
the chill.
yeah, because you
It's
got to then have basically the sex talk before
yes.
maybe you would have even like
It's
it's
so,
layered.
and I'm glad you said, like I've said, nitty gritty a couple times, because it's a lot. And, being a psychologist, if you haven't had, sexual trauma in your life, or, if your life has been sort of
Cookie
not with
cutter.
that in it, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it happens a lot,
Yeah.
the percentage of this happening is much greater than I think any of us would like to believe. And the long-term implications of this are really significant. And, I've even said, like, I fear people are not going to want to go into some areas of medicine because of this, because
Mm.
physicians can't practice in a way that the Hippocratic Oath says that, there's this, they're supposed to heal, keep the patient alive that's in front of them, but yet the
Mhm.
government is saying this thing that could be a treatment that could help them. They're literally, the female is literally and again, depending on states and where you live,
Right.
has to be near death, which can, and then if they're able to survive, they could have severe complications from sort of like the letting things go on too long. So
Right.
it is, and if you've got a daughter like Izzy Busy, the kinds of questions she asks are,
I
everyone sort
can't
of
even
says,
imagine.
it's I don't even know if some of them are appropriate to say here. And some of them I'm like, I don't even know if I would have known to ask that when I was 12. And for most, I will say for most people, and when I talked about this with my son, who's 18 months younger, he was just like a couple questions and we're done. Now
Right.
he was also younger. He's also a boy, but he also is very close with Izzy. And, he is very verbal, very talkative, very inquisitive. And, with baseball, he's asking 500 questions. I guess with this, he's just not as interested, and, that's fine. We'll see if that changes over time. But he is someone that on certain topics, he asks very deep and, very, what I think are very intelligent questions about things. And, the conversation was probably 5 minutes. I was, like, oh God, what's he going to say? What's he going to ask? How's he going to answer? It's like, okay, say the question back to myself in my head, and then answer just what he said until another question is asked. And when he is done, we're going to walk out of the room. That worked perfectly with him. With Izzy, I think at 70 minutes, I said, okay, we're done now.
70
We're
minutes, Alissa. Oh
I
my
mean,
goodness.
70 minutes. Every question led to another question. Sort
Yeah.
of like how does this go into that? I don't know what level of vocabulary I could use here on
It's
this.
biology. It's
Okay,
fine.
biology. So, how does the penis go into the vagina?
Yeah.
Okay. How so then I have to start talking about an erection, which I did, and I'm like, well, the book didn't talk about this, or
Yeah.
the other
Like the how-to book didn't go into
yeah,
that. Yeah.
like, okay, and then it's like, okay, how long does that stay in there for?
Oh
And
my
it's like,
goodness. Yeah.
that that's a great question, and it's an appropriate question, but and it did not stop. So then how do you know when you're done?
Right.
It's a great question.
Oh my
And then what do you do? Do you just sit there? Like, well, that depends. This is how that conversation went about 3 years ago.
yeah.
So I think, or 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And she really started to inquire when I was pregnant for the
Mm.
third time. That's when she really started asking questions. And I missed the boat because I was really pregnant and we moved. This was my youngest son was born in April of 2017. So she was young. I guess she was 7 at the time. And she was like, how did that thing get in there? And I'm like, that's a great question. And I haven't done the research. So
Yeah.
and I'm not I work with adults. So I'm not, I have to do a little research to find out how I want to talk about something. I have to collect myself
Yeah.
um, and sort of say, okay, don't go on and on. I have to like do a little self-talk before these conversations.
Yeah.
I don't go on and on. But I had no idea that the conversation was going to go there. And just for all you listeners out there, I think for most, it doesn't go there. I think at some point it does, but like later, and now they're probably learning it on TikTok. And that's actually the thing you don't want to happen. You
Right.
want these conversations to happen with you,
Yeah.
because if they don't happen with you, then the message and the value around sex, love, intimacy, connection, partners, however your family sees that, that's how you want to communicate that message to your kids, girl, boy, they, any
Yeah.
it needs to be communicated by you. And if you wait too long, if you miss the mark, when your kid asks you, you better answer. So all you listeners out there, find the book. I have a great one. We can talk about that later, but you better be ready, because then when you come back to it, your child might not be ready to talk about it, which is
Mm.
actually what happened in Izzy's case. And then I sort of manipulated that situation, because I remember how I got my son to make his bed, which is to overpraise my daughter. They had shared a room at that point. And so I was going to start talking about this with my son, and then you
And
know,
it got her
it
back into it.
yeah, Izzy got a little bit jealous that I was having this like heart-to-heart conversation with my son. And he's like, "Well, I want to talk about it." I was like, "Oh, you're interested in it again. Okay, great. We'll talk about it, but tomorrow, like only one conversation."
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was really, so again, as I described some of the conversations I had with her around sex, you could imagine what she was asking me about abortions. And, one of the questions she asked me that just, it was really hard. So she's like, "So mom, what you're saying is, if I decide whenever I'm ready to have," and it went like this. It was so mature, I thought. I mean, maybe it's not. I don't know. I mean, I only have one 12-year-old. And, moms have so much to talk about all the time. Usually this, isn't usually high on the hierarchy list, because as soon as it happens, we try to put it out of our minds as quickly as we can. And if you have more than one daughter, like, wow, like bless you, because I do think I think it's hard for any gendered kid for sure. But I think, for girls, it's like, it's their body. I mean, women have not always had the right to vote. And so, it's we're sort of, rights are being taken away from us. And we used to have them, and sort of now we don't. And again, not everywhere, but that's scary. And for every election, we need to be taking this seriously, because when what happens when you take your eye off the ball? Like, it gets taken from you.
Yeah.
And so we need to know that, like, things are really turning, and not for the better, if you want women to be able to, make choices for themselves and their own. Again, whatever you decide to do is whatever you decide to do, and that's fine, but it just should be your decision. It should not be a state decision. It should not be,
Yeah.
this should not get into government and politics,
Yeah.
right? Like that's separate.
Yeah. Yeah. So just going back to Izzy Busy for a minute. At
Biz.
at 70 minutes, like you're kind of proud, but you're also like, this is
And
enough.
we're, we're
And
done.
yeah, and I
Therapy
wonder
sessions, Christy, are
what's
50
that?
minutes. Therapy sessions are 50 minutes for a reason. It's like, you'll flood somebody, you'll
Yeah.
flood the client, or you'll flood yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So that's, but it's like, so okay. So you do 70 minutes of this conversation and we're done. And now she has moved you, and she's moved herself to create this account to try to get kids under 18 who don't have the voting power, to encourage the adults around them to vote. And essentially, you've extended the conversation. How,
yeah.
what is the conversation like on the platform, and what is her, how is she trying to get the kids to talk to their parents? Like, how, what's the, mm, you know?
This, I know exactly what you're saying. And just really, really quickly before I answer that, I didn't tell the story, which is what sort of moved us. So she said, so if I decide when I'm ready to have a baby, and, it doesn't work out for whatever reason, early in the pregnancy, or, way into the pregnancy,
Mm,
um, that means that I wouldn't be able to get the medical care that I might need. Like,
mm,
because there's one thing if it's sort of, you're not ready and you're young,
right.
right? But there's another thing when it's like, you're actually really trying to do this because you want to extend your family, and
Right.
you have to now think about your health being in jeopardy. And I said, yes, I said, yes, that is correct. That even if it's something that you and your significant other are wanting to do, and you're the one carrying the child, if something does not go right in the states right now that it's banned, that the same goes. It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter that you wanted this, and the fact that, there's a miscarriage, or still, whatever is happening is, the rules still apply.
Yeah.
And, people will say, oh, well, except for, they'll make exceptions, right, for, rape, or incest, or whatever. But that, in practice, it doesn't really go like that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's sort of, when a whole state is not allowing this to happen, then there isn't anywhere to go
Yeah.
in the state to
Well, and
get
there's a lot of gray area, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
it's then becomes a he said, she said sometimes of, was it rape?
yes.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation, and at the
And
end of
then
the
you've got
day
medical
yeah, go ahead.
you have medical providers who then aren't detectives.
Right, right.
And so they can go to federal prison by I mean, and that's why I also said, like, I fear in 10, 15 years, we're not going to have doctors for us to get the proper medical care, or
Yeah.
we're going to have to wait too long for proper medical care. And, when you think about even after your childbearing age, as a gynecologist is going to see you for, the prenatal health, but they also keep seeing you for ovarian cancers and
Mhm.
all those things. And I really am concerned about where our medical field is going to go. I mean, if you um if you're sort of forced, it's like federal prison or keep somebody alive. I know that's extreme, but that is what is happening.
Yeah.
And so that's really scary. I mean, it would take an act of, you know, eh, enormous proportions to go into the field of women's health.
Yeah.
And then what do we do?
Yeah. And what you and Izzy are trying to do now is to kind
Both.
of grab hold of all the people who have in the past sort of just taken the route of, I'm not really political, or I'm too busy, or I don't have interest or time to vote. And what you two are saying now is that doesn't cut it anymore.
Mhm.
Get involved. Like,
Get,
you get involved for your kid, if for no one else, because
yeah.
we don't have a choice anymore.
I've had people say, "Oh, I don't really care about that issue. I'm, outside of the childbearing age." And I'm like, okay, well, your kid is going to have a kid maybe, or they're going to have friends that are going to, it's like
You know someone.
someone. That's the
Right.
thing. Like, even if it's not you, someone. And if love and care about the people that you have in your life, somebody very close to you is going to be affected by this. And then as their friend, as their family member, as their loved one, you are going to vicariously be, I mean, if you are a good person, and we're just going to assume everybody listening is to your podcast,
Mhm.
that they're going to be dealing with this on some level. And when you are going through a difficult time with a good friend, it's so, if they're really a good friend, it's like you're going through it with them.
Yeah.
And so and there is vicarious trauma. When you witness a traumatic thing, you can also be suffering symptoms after the traumatic event, even if it did not happen to you. Sometimes even listening to somebody describe a traumatic event can lead
Yeah.
to PTSD symptoms. But especially considering if things have happened to you in your past, but they're just not present currently.
Right. Well, and
So
I think, yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I think that the thing with all of this, right, is we're voting, and we're putting people in power, and we're putting um okay, so we're putting people in power, and we're making changes that could have ripple effects down the line, that if, like, it's kind of like what I'm thinking of, what I'm getting at is, back when it was the vote on whether gay kids should be able to get married or not, gay people should be able to get married or not. It didn't matter to politicians until all of a sudden that politician's son or daughter was gay. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know. So even if you have to be personally affected by an issue to take a stance on it, assume at some point you will, because you will. Like, you
When
don't,
I
whether
I
it's
think
your
life
kid or your uncle's kid or someone and care about.
and I like to say life
Mm,
is long. And you know, we all should have choice to have the life that we want. And
mhm,
you know, yeah, I just, even as we're talking about this, it's like after you and I say something, it's like you have to like pause and like take a deep breath, because when you really stop to think about it, it is so heavy and extensive and deep, and it is not going away. And
right.
so, some people say, oh, well, voting doesn't matter, or my state, is a Democratic state, or it's a Republican state, or whatever it is. And it's like, Yeah, I mean, but also media is a little bit sensational, and depending on what you watch or what you hear, who knows what the numbers are. I mean, there's
Yeah.
the way voting is categorized is, there's a lot of stuff involved with that. And so it's like I always like to say, control the controllables. Okay.
Yeah.
You can control how the voting is categorized and, wherever they're sort of like positioning, where sections of the city are, and how many people are in it and so on and so forth. So I don't even know what the numbers are. I just know what I'm doing and what the people are doing around me are doing. And it starts with one. And so I can control myself voting and people around me voting.
Mhm.
And you asked me, so what did we decide to focus on the TikTok account? And that's a great question, because oh my God, there could have been so much we focused on. We could teach things, we could just, and I wanted to do that. And, a couple of people were like, you got to niche down. Okay. So in niching down, we were like, what's right in front of us? Voting, right?
Mhm.
Where are we running out of time to vote, right? And especially with, um, registering. Are you registered? Are you going to be in town?
Mhm.
Planning for this. It's like you plan for the party, you make sure you have the outfit, you make sure you have the shoes or the dress fits, or that you get your nails and toes done, right? Like I do all those things. But
Mhm.
why is all my voting stuff situated?
Mm.
Right, for November 8th? Am I ready? Do I know where I'm supposed to go? And, if I'm out of town, like, let me do the mail in. But the dates are very specific and they are very easy to find. But I think, and the numbers do show, and again, 38% is what, excuse me, I saw in the 2020 election. Okay, so let's say it was 40 or 45, still, like
Right.
it just needs to be more. And
Yeah.
so the TikTok account is focused on voting. Just go vote. And
Right.
then we'll see where things go, right? But for right now, just raising energy and awareness about voting. So we are going to be doing a postcard event, and my daughter's gotten some of her friends involved to get them excited. And I'm terrible at math, but the power of one and multiplying, right? So if like one person talks to three people who talk to three people who talk to three people who talk to, we're on 100 people,
Right.
right? And so especially for busy moms, really any busy parent, but busy moms, on the day of voting, we have November 8th is just another day of diapers and poops and lunches and dinners, and who's out of mouthwash and toothpaste, and who peed the bed, and what sheets do I need to change, and then your work schedule and all the other things. So voting is like, if your kids are saying, don't feed us, don't do anything, just go vote. Like if voting can be Mother's Day,
Mm.
kids get to do breakfast in bed,
That's
or
good. Yeah.
right, like then we would, can we just treat voting like like a day that we stop, like we
Yes.
need to be interrupted. What was Oh, the NBA. Oh my God, we're going to definitely do awareness about that. The NBA, no games. There are going to be no games, no
Wow.
NBA games on November 8th. Why? To take a stance and say, go vote. Don't come to our game, because sometimes the polls are open till 8,
Yeah.
right? Go vote.
Yeah.
Go. Don't watch us. Go vote.
Yeah. So, and you've said it, but I just want to restate it. I think at the beginning of this conversation, you and I strongly implied where we stand on a particular issue, right? But the point is whatever
Yeah.
side you sit on, vote. And
No judgment. No
right.
judgment.
And
Just go.
where you were saying, yeah, because I've heard it too. And I've even felt it of well, I have a typically Democratic state, or I have a typically this state, and da da da. So I don't need to get involved. It's like that's where it comes back to the not underestimating the power of one. Because if we always have historically been, say, a Democratic state somewhere, how do we think it changes?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
doesn't start to change by saying, it always is because it'll always be. Like, no, you are one person. Even if you are one vote today on November 8th, next year, maybe your one vote, like you said, ripple effects into 100 more votes. And it may not be, and it by no means is, a perfect system that we have here in this country, but it is the system that we have right now.
Yes, yes. So we just have to move forward accordingly.
Yeah.
And if you take the apathetic, it's like, oh well, it is what it is. It isn't what it is, because I listened to a New York Times daily podcast, and this man worked for 50 years to overturn it. And he's probably in his 70s, and
Yeah.
it's like, and now it's like he's like, it's going to take another 50 years to undo it, but it's like he's like, we won. and
Yeah.
and he was delightful and very very, I appreciated his stance on it. He's like from Indiana. His father, I think, was a professor at Indiana, and he literally he went to law school, and he literally spent his entire career, 50 years, to overturn. So it's pretty incredible. And so if we,
There's proof, though, that it can be done right there.
yes,
Whatever you want done, that's the proof that it can be done.
chip away, chip away, chip away. But if we see it as this, if all you see is the top of the mountain, you're not going to be able to figure out a way to climb. If you see
Mm,
26 point whatever in the, running a marathon, what is it, 26.4, 26.6,
20, I think
something
it's
that's a lot.
26-1, isn't it?
26-1, something that I would never run, because I feel like I would break by mile 8. But for all of you marathon runners, it's like, whenever you're training for a race, I know a lot of people that do this. Whenever you don't start, oh God, how am I going to do the 26 plus miles? No, you're like, I'm going to train. I'm going to do the first 2 miles or whatever. I have
Right.
no idea what the training schedule is, but that's what you do.
Right.
But my I am born and raised in Dallas, Texas,
Mm,
southerner. Sometimes the accent comes out a little bit. And we were not talking. I mean, I'm 44, and when I was in school, we never talked about politics in school. Now my husband, who's 2 years older, is like, we always talked about politics in school, we always talked about politics in the house.
hmm.
And I was like, we didn't.
Yeah.
Then I go to college in Wisconsin, a incredibly liberal town. I'm like, well, this is cool. Like, there's a lot of protests. I was like, my eyes were,
Culture shock, right?
but I got my bachelor's of arts. I majored in psychology and sociology. Like, I wasn't taking political science. So,
Right.
nobody was telling me how to switch my voter registration or do a mail-in ballot. Who was talking to me about that? I
Right.
mean, maybe my parents should have, but it sure wasn't, and I honestly do not remember anybody ever talking to me about that. And I would say that that's consistent for the friends that I had, growing up. And it wasn't till I moved here to the East Coast. And my husband is very very knowledgeable, very, and he's not necessarily involved in things in the city, but he knows things. He's very educated in this area, and we have a lot of conversations about it. And it's been in probably like the past 15 years, but I wouldn't say that it really now has become a force for me inside.
Hmm.
Because in my home, it is, I'm talking about things that I just feel, again, we weren't even talking about voting, much less sex, abortion, miscarriage, all these things, not being able to get medical care. So, and everything's changing. Like Planned Parenthood was on the corner of, one of the blocks in the city. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? Can I get involved? I mean,
Hmm.
now I see it everywhere. I probably would have walked by, and they're like,
Yeah.
we're asking for donations, because actually, abortion, which it was only the pill form of the abortion, was only 25% of what Planned Parenthood does. 75% is just giving, you know, medical care to women.
Yeah.
And shutting down Planned Parenthood means, again, more women aren't going to get medical care. So these things have
Mm,
a huge
yeah.
impact. So, now we're donating to Planned Parenthood. I'm like, thank you so much for being out here. I was like, how many people donate? I love to know I'm not great at math. I love to know numbers of things. she was like, we expect to get 3% of people. I'm like, 3% of people? I'm like, let me stand out here on the court. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, 4%, right? It's like
Yeah.
just one, just
Yeah.
1 more percent. And, like to any of the listeners, it's like, whatever means something to you, whatever matters, it's like and it's a great lesson for your kids to show them, because it's like, I always say, actions speak louder than words. So it's great when you feel strongly about something, but show your kids that when you feel strongly about something, you can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's, if you can give finances, great. If you can't, you can do things like I am trying to do a little, and just talking in your normal life. Like, people will be like, oh, kids her age, what's November 8th? Like,
Hmm.
November is my birthday.
Right.
Well, you've got a lucky birthday month, friend, because your month is voting. So you can associate voting with your birthday, and we can all celebrate, right?
Yeah.
It's like people don't know. So just talking in basic education
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. No, I think it's wonderful. And I think that, um, the reason why we discuss this and thought it had a place here is because of that. There's the parenting aspect of this, right? The modeling for our children and the doing and the and the active part, and then there's the actually having these conversations. And I think you don't have to get involved in the sides. It's just get involved in some
Just
way
yes.
and start to just
Mhm.
talk to your kids about the implications of voting. And I think for me personally, where this comes into mental health for me is not just about being a parent and a woman and just a human being in today's society, but what I loved what you said and you've said it here and you said it when we initially talked is it's about being involved in something bigger than yourself.
Mhm.
It's about voting for someone else because you have the power to do so. You don't feel personally called? Get some information, listen to a podcast, read a newspaper for someone else, whether it's your kid, your sister, your brother, your friend. Like, I think, we live in a very, the US is all like the individual. It's like I think, generally speaking, and I'm tensing up as I think this, but we have to think beyond ourselves. And one of the best and easiest really, not that it's easy, but register to vote.
Yeah, and if you want to raise good humans, which I am assuming that all of your podcast listeners do, you have to show them how to be a good human. And
Yeah.
look, voting might not be the thing, and that's cool. No judgment on that. But then pick something that matters, and do the thing. I've gotten creative, and again, like, tell me no 5 times, one person's going to tell me yes. And it's just doing one thing. If we all did, literally, if you think about it, if we all did just one thing, it's like at that social event that you're going to this weekend, just talk about it with 5 people and tell them to talk about it with 5 people. I mean, they're going to go and be like, oh my God, right, I moved. Do you know how many people moved because of
Yeah.
COVID? Right,
Yeah.
they're living in different places. They're just, and it's like, oh, it's too late. Well, it's not too late. If you're listening to this pod, it is not too late,
Yeah.
and it is really easy. And it just block 15 minutes and get it done. Just do the mail-in ballot if you want.
Yeah.
Just get it done right now.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Alisa, I love what you're doing. I love that you're doing it with your daughter. Like, it just makes it,
Thank you.
just warm and fuzzy in a way. And you and I will get some resources together, some links that we can put in the show notes. Just where to even like search for this stuff. So for anyone listening who's feeling like they want to read a little bit more, or actually just go ahead and register because that's what we want you to do. But I appreciate you. Is there um anything left to say on this before we go and put it in the hands of the listeners?
I just thank you for providing a platform for us mental health people to, be interviewed on really important, meaningful topics to everybody. And being just moms and caring and wanting to create good humans and having topics and discussions about these things. So thank you for doing that for us and being, the voice and the conversations for all of us. So you're awesome. And I appreciate being asked to be here.
Sure. Thank you. Vote. Okay? Just go vote. I know it's not a perfect system that we have here, but it is the system that we have to work with for the moment. So please go vote. If you are active on social media, particularly on TikTok, I'm sure you have seen, the way I have firsthand, just how differently Gen Zers, and you're hearing now in Izzy's case as a younger Gen Zer, how they feel about some of the politics, world news, and so on. And yeah, it's a whole thing on there. If you're not familiar, please go on TikTok. Please do some Googling. Because you know what? If you are a parent of one of these kids, a grandparent, an aunt, a teacher, a friend, a mentor, a sibling, a nanny, whoever you are, if you're not interested in voting for yourself, vote for them. Alissa and Izzy's mission to me is so honorable. And like I said on the show, I just love that they are doing it together. I did not expect to quote unquote get political on this show, but I think Alissa's story is so relevant to mental health and particularly maternal mental health. Here's Alissa, a therapist, and she's sharing just how unsure she was of how to handle these types of conversations with her kids. And whether you quote unquote like or are into politics or not, if you have a relationship with a child, the potential for him, her, or they to ask you a question about what's happening in the world is there. And if the questions lead to them asking you if you're using your voice and your power as an eligible voter, what do you want the answer to be? And I genuinely mean that question, like no judgment, but what do you want the answer to be? All of this is so personal and unique to each family, but again, I thought the message was worth getting out there that there is even just one 12-year-old girl who's concerned with who is and isn't voting. And she's concerned about it because she understands that her future medical care is in our hands. It's really powerful, don't you think? And lastly, I want to say that I, Alissa, and I'm sure even Izzy to some extent, understand that we are approaching this mission and topic from a place of privilege. We understand that our place is not to be taken lightly, and we know that the way this system is set up right now, it might not truly be feasible for everyone to do all the things that need to happen in order to register to vote and then eventually vote. I really loved how Alissa was talking about, can we just make Election Day like Mother's Day, a day where we all stop, where we all plan, where we all make mothers a priority. It's so true. So anyway, if you can and are willing, explore your options, learn about it, and ultimately, if you can, vote. All right, and before we go, I want to remind you about Modern Mom Style Box by our friend Tara Clark. Modern Mom Style Box makes it easy to wear new clothes all month long without any stress or commitment. From seasonal staples to statement pieces, rent unlimited looks for just one flat fee of $60 a month. Take it from me. As a current client, you're going to want this. The link and details are in the show notes. All right, so thank you, Alissa. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.